All right, so we're gonna look at using object IDs and stencil layers in Unreal to render out from Unreal as EXR files that we are then going to recomposite in After Effects with our original video file. I am working on the same file that I was last week. Actually, if I play it, everything looks really smeary right now. So I'm going to change my anti-aliasing setting, which I talked about before. Project settings, anti-aliasing. The good looking one is temporal super resolution. I'm just going to change this to FXAA for right now so it doesn't look so smeary. Then when I go and render, I'll change it back. But otherwise, it just looks terrible while I'm editing. Okay, maybe I will just do a tiny bit more quick world building while we're here, just to build out this scene a little bit more. I don't think we've ever set it up yet, and I don't want to take a bunch of time to set it up, so I'm just going to start using it and show you that it's a thing, and then you can set it up on your own. But I'm going to use Quixel Megascans to add some assets into my project. So rather than using the marketplace, we talked about this. Quixel is a company that Epic bought a couple years ago. They're a photogrammetry company that has tons of 3D assets and textures and materials to use for free. It is now built into Unreal Engine 5, and it's quite easy to access. We get it from the little green button up here where we add Datasmith. If you go to Quixel Bridge, probably won't work for you right off the bat because you might be able to browse, but it won't be set up to install because you have to create an account and stuff or log in with your Epic account. But there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I can use. I've already gone through and imported some of this stuff already in the interest of time. So I'm not going to do that. But let's just say I wanted, or I'll go to the home page. This old workshop looks really cool. What do we got here? Oh, I'm going to get this old rusty bow saw. I click download. It's going to download. It also asks me like what quality I want it. The quality is how many triangles it has, basically. How high res is the 3D model. And then I click add to actually add it to my open Unreal Engine project. And check this out. It comes right over. I have it in, where's it at? Megascans, 3D assets, rusty bow saw. There it is in Unreal, just like that. Super fast. You just have to log in with your Epic account. It should just work nowadays. There used to be a little bit more setup because it was kind of a separate program, but it's much more integration now with Unreal Engine 5. So another great resource for assets, really photorealistic assets. I mean, they're photogrammetry scans, so they look real. All right, well, I have already gotten some assets here, so I'm just going to keep building. I got some pumpkins, or a big pumpkin, and then this was something I was looking for last week, struggling to find. Megascans has lots of this stuff. Ground, right? Ground and dead trees. There's lots of those in Megascans because they don't move, so they're easy to scan for photogrammetry. So I'm going to add some ground into my shot. And remember, it's easy to get lost, and it's very important that we place things at 0, 0, 0 to start with in the center of our world. Also, it might appear very tiny, depending on, every project's going to be different depending on your 3D camera track. but it's very tiny, so I need to scale this thing way up. I don't know. I'm just going to put 50 in here. That's big-ish, maybe 75. I'm just building a world. I'm going to kind of speed run my way through this a little bit. So the thinking here is that even though the color is a little bit different right now, I'm going to try to merge the ground that is real in the garden with the ground that I'm building in Unreal. And the more that I do this, I'm not going to take a ton of time doing it today, but the more effort you put into this, the more realistic results you're going to get in the end. I'm going to remove this floor so I can actually see what I'm doing. Scrub my sequencer. And heck, I could cover up the entire background if I wanted to. At that point, it's like, why did you even shoot her on a real location? Just shoot it on green screen. Maybe you leave a tiny portion of the real world. Really depends on what you're ultimately trying to achieve. But I'm going to throw some more pumpkins in here. Scale this guy up. More. A lot more. Big pumpkin. Maybe a little too big. And also, this starts to solve that problem that I had where pumpkin's just floating on over top of video, right? It doesn't look like it's sunken down in and a heavy pumpkin with weight to it that's kind of nestled itself into the ground over the course of a growing season, right? But this one, it's not great because I didn't spend any time over it, but it looks better already, and it took no effort than it does this one. So that's the idea, is that we start to merge these worlds together, the real and the fake. And it's through compositing that we are able to do that. What else do I got here? So I put some pumpkins in the background. I think I had some grass that I imported. There's lots of grass in Megascans. What's this grass look like? Oh, not foliage, static meshes. Well, that grass is a little big, but we'll see how it looks. Notice that there's little pieces of grass in the video footage. So it's something good to start to merge the worlds together, right? In reality, I would probably want dirt that's a little bit more broken up and uneven. Looking through a marketplace or Quixel marketplace, we're limited with what we could find. You could go in and edit these models if you wanted. You could make your own if you wanted. If you really want to spend a lot of time with it, making it really great, then you can go ahead and do that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of slam some presets together and call it a day. If you're ever placing assets in Unreal with a tracked camera and then you go and scrub in sequencer and things just look like they're flying around and they're in the sky, make sure that you check that they're not placed at like 1,000,000 Y value, 10,000 X value. Make sure they're at 0 Z value, and then you can move them around. It's really easy to accidentally place things. Like, let me just place this grass here. I'll just drop it in my level, thinking that it's going to go right here. Where's it at? See if I can get it to fly around. No, it's not that bad. Kind of sticks. But sometimes things just flying around all over the place. And the reason for that is because you've actually placed them really close to the camera by accident. Just check the transform values on those meshes and make some modifications. Yeah. The white balance? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it almost doesn't matter because we're going to do that in post-production. You can if you want to, but this is the limitation of using image plates, which I talked about earlier, is that if I go into the camera, right, and I click on image plate, there's no color grading here. So I have to change all this stuff in the camera. So if I go to here, color temperature, white balance, right? If I change the color temperature, it changes it not just on the picture, but on the 3D assets as well. The limitation of the image plate, it's called kind of mushed together. When we render this out though, I'm not actually going to use the video footage that's from Unreal. I'm going to use the original video footage and place all the other stuff behind and in front of it. And I'll be able to color it there. If you wanted to, with the image plate, it's quite difficult to do. I guess you could change the color of the materials, but it's just a lot of work, you know. It's easier to do it in post-production. Where was I? I'm gonna make this grass a little bit bigger. Well, check this out. I already went and built a map, so I'm just gonna load that map. That's kind of a similar thing. I know we have a lot to talk about today, so I did it already. Is my sequencer. Another thing is when using the Datasmith import, and sometimes I find this annoying, maybe you don't, because maybe you don't know, but you know, usually you go up to the slate here to click on your level sequence that you have, right? But there's nothing here because the level sequence actually isn't in the level. Because when we did the Datasmith import, it never put it in the level in the outliner. We can always get it by just going to our content browser and double clicking and loading it up, and there it is. But I find that kind of annoying. So you could just drag it into your level and then it should pop up here. Pro tip. I got that error again because I opened a new level. Need to fix active references. Oops. Made that floor way too big. Game view. Similar thing, I just took a little bit more time with it. Notice there's a lot of flickering on the grass because it's so thin. It's because I turned off the anti-aliasing, the nice anti-aliasing. I turned it off because it made the video look terrible. When we render that out, I'm going to turn it back on. Essentially, I have a scene here. I haven't really played around with lighting a lot or anything like that. If we have time, we'll come back and talk about actually putting shadows on the video footage itself, because some of these shadows should fall on the actual ground, even though they don't right now. I still have my rendered red solid in the video footage, so you just have to ignore that. Or actually, you know what? Oh, you don't see it anymore. All right, so we build a world. We could spend a little bit more work on it, but that's fine. We can keep covering stuff up. Put stuff way in the background, like, I don't know, a haunted house or something like that, or a big mausoleum, or maybe there's like mummies busting out of a mausoleum and they're coming after her or something like that. We really take this to the next level with some more work. And just have the actual video footage of her shot in the garden, just have that be the immediate area around where she's standing. Everything else be fake. She had no idea what she was getting in for when dear old dad asked her to stand there in the garden. Movie magic. Well, now I'm going to render it out. So I'm going to save. Oops. I'm going to save and render this baby out. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to turn something on. Well, there's a couple different things that we need. You probably already have the movie render queue on because that was one of the first things we turned on. Or we don't get this old stuff. We don't get the new features with this old one. So you probably already have movie render queue turned on. But what you probably don't have turned on is the bottom one. Movie render queue, additional render passes. This is what we need for CryptoMat and pretty much just CryptoMat. So we need to make sure those things are on. I already have them on, so I don't need to restart. You will have to restart to see them. Otherwise, you just won't see the option for some things. Before we get into the rendering, I do want to show you just layers first. So layers can be used independently of camera tracking, compositing. You can just use layers to organize your world in Unreal. It's kind of a nice feature to have. If you go to Window, Layers, that's where you can get the window pop-up. We didn't even talk about levels. We might talk about levels a little bit once we start shooting on the wall. I haven't really decided yet. Essentially, levels are sort of like layers, but they can be entire worlds that you can then turn on and off like levels. It's pretty neat, or like layers. It's pretty neat. So like if you're playing a video game and the video game Mass Effect used to do this a lot, but all video games do this. You would complete a level and then you would go into the elevator, and the elevator would start going to wherever it's going because it's loading the next level, the next huge world, right? So what was happening, they weren't using Unreal, but what was happening was they turn off the old level. As soon as you get in the elevator, they turn off the old level. They turn on the new level. The elevator is actually a level as well. And then it's a seamless thing that happens. It's pretty neat. And Unreal uses something like this too. It's also great for you working with teams on things. You say I have a team of 4 of you and we're each working on separate things. Maybe one of you is working on the lighting. I'm working on the pumpkin meshes. You're working on the gravestones. Somebody else is working on the grass. If we were working on this as a team, we wouldn't be able to work on those things all at the same time if it was all on the same level. So if we break those elements out into separate levels, you can work on level grass. I can work on level tombstones and work on level pumpkins. It's a little ambitious for what we're doing in here, but if you ever go work on larger projects for larger teams, that's what they use. Anyways, that's levels, but I'm going to load up the layers panel. Put layers in the outliner so it doesn't take up so much room. All right, so layers is just blank to start with. And let's say I wanted to put some stuff in a layer. I don't know, like the front fence here. So it's 2 different pieces. So I select them, and then if I right click in layers, it says, or I can create an empty layer, like an empty folder in Photoshop, or I can take the actors that I have selected and add them to a new layer. I'm going to do the second one. Just call this front gate. Oh, look at that. I have a layer with those 2 actors in there that I can then turn off because they're grouped together. You can put as many assets as you want in a layer. You can have as many layers as you want. Obviously, it depends on whatever it is that you're doing and how organized you want to be and what the layers do for you. If you want to see what is in this layer, there's a little button down here that says See Contents. You click that, and it shows you what's in there. You can remove things, you can add things. Pretty simple. But when we use our stencil layers to render, it's going to give me the option. There's a drop-down menu, and it says, what do you want to render? In this case, I would select front gate, and then I will just get the front gate cut out on transparency, which is pretty cool. Don't have to rotoscope it. Let's do object IDs first, though. So it's time to render. I'm happy with this. Looks great. Feeling good. I'm going to open up the movie render queue. And change some settings. Do not want to render JPEGs. So I'll turn that off. Actually, I'll just delete that. Never want to see that again. Click on settings. And I need to pick EXRs. And also object IDs. If you didn't turn on that movie render queue, additional render passes or additional passes render, something like that. If you don't turn that plugin on, you won't see this option. So dead giveaway if you miss that, or you didn't restart Unreal. So object IDs, there's not a ton of options here when you select on it. Ask us what type of ID do we want. We have some options. Full is going to give us everything that the render can provide. We get a unique ID per material, per actor in the world. If we just selected on material, it means that anything that has the same material name is going to be grouped together. So like I have multiple pumpkins in the world, right? They're using the same material for the pumpkin. So they will be grouped together as one piece, which could be useful. It depends on what you're trying to do. Why does this matter? Because what if I had a field of pumpkins, right? And for some reason in post-production, I want to select them all. I don't know, brighten them up a little bit or darken them a little bit, something. I don't know, 500 pumpkins in my scene. If I set this to full, every single one of those little things, I'm going to need to click on in After Effects 500 times. Very exciting to do, right? Whereas if I don't need individual control over those pumpkins, in that case, and this is a really silly example, if I don't need individual control over those pumpkins, and I just want to select them all as a group, then I could just have them be material and it will put them all together. It'll basically make them one group of pumpkins rather than individual actors. And there's some other options here that are useful. Usually I just do full. But I encourage you to experiment with different options there. What else? In the EXR settings, it's important to make sure that multi-layer is checked. Because otherwise you're not going to get multiple layers. Also, you should choose where you want to save this. Let's make a folder here. Sure. One other thing that I don't think I noted. No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Actually, that might be the reason for the diagonal in the image plate happening. I think I had that turned off. Enable alpha channel support? Could be. Could be. Or that could also be a reason maybe why the green screen was not coming in with the hole. Maybe it wasn't the material problem. Maybe it was because you had this disabled. Usually we want this set to allow through tone mapper. But disabled should work fine for this. All right, so we set up the EXRs, we picked the object IDs. If you have translucent objects, make sure that's checked. I do not have translucent objects here. So I'm going to click accept, and I'm going to click render. All right, stencil layers and object IDs, part 2. So here we have a world that was already constructed in the previous video. Scrub the timeline, all good. I have turned on my plugins for Movie Render Queue and Movie Render Queue additional render passes. We need that on to get the object ID option to pop up. Also, while we're here and doing things and restarting Unreal, you should go to project settings and type in alpha and change enable alpha channel support and post-processing to allow through tone mapper. It's going to ask you to restart. It's probably going to take a while to come back. Just be patient. Now, if I want to render out object IDs, go to the movie render queue, choose EXR, choose multi-layer, go to settings, go to object IDs. I don't think I have any translucent objects, but I'll just click that just in case. If you don't have that object IDs option, it's because you didn't turn on the plugin. Go back a minute and a half and watch that part of the video. Object IDs, just choosing the folder to save this in. Test 2. Oops. Rendering out, not what I want to render out. Just unchecking this stuff because I had it already selected because we were doing stencil layers, but yours should already be off. Let's render the skin. There we go. So this could take a little while to render, longer than if you were just rendering it out without object IDs. I'm going to open up After Effects. Import these files. File. Where's this at? Object ID test 2. Should name your folders with good names. Unlike me right now. I have some in here from the bad render that I did with the pumpkin. I'm just going to find the first file. This shouldn't be a problem for you. Actually, I can just delete these ones. Import. Send me the file and I'll look at it. So just re-render that real quick. It messed up. Import. There we go. All right, so it looks like the footage here. But if we want to get the crypto matte layer, we need to add the crypto matte effect. So in effects, I'm going to go to crypto matte, drag it on, drag it to the layer. Oh, need to actually make a composition first. My bad. Crypto matte onto the layer, and you'll see this little colorful view. Crypto matte effect up here. When your output is set to colors, this is what you see. This is the object IDs right here. So I could select this gate, for instance. If I scrub my footage, make sure you scrub your footage to make sure that you're selecting everything. I'm just left clicking and holding down shift to select more stuff. If you hold down control click, you can get rid of stuff that you have selected already. I'm just going to select the gate here. Now if I change my output from colors to one of these other things, I can see just the matte by itself. I could see just the matted colors, the inverted matte basically, or I can see matted RGB, which is with the gate itself, by itself. If I were to bring in the original footage, like the original footage, the footage that I first gave to you as a zip file, should all sync up. Beautiful. Now we could do things to this. We could, now that the fence is separated, I could add, oops, not to that layer, but I could add some effects to it. I could adjust the levels on it. I could, add some blur to it. Remember, the limitation of object IDs is they don't really maintain things like motion blur or depth of field. You see here, this fence is motion blurred, but it's actually kind of jaggy on the edges. So if you have motion blur in your shot, pencil layers are going to work better for you. Like here, there's a lot of motion blur, but it's just a harsh cutout edge. There's actually some pixel bleed over here. And you can keep doing that for however many layers that you want. What if I wanted a pumpkin? Crypto matte effect on the pumpkin layer. You should also start naming your layers. Pumpkin. Fence. Video. Whatever makes sense to name. Add crypto matte to the pumpkin layer. Just select the pumpkin. Change colors to matted RGB. And now I have the pumpkin by itself. You can't really move these things around too much because it's going to have a hole in it. See some pixel bleed there on the fence too. But I can color them separately. Yeah, little intense coloring there, but you get the idea. So that's object IDs. What about stencil layers? So for stencil layers, I'm going to go in here. We don't need object IDs. We do need EXRs. I'm not going to do multi-layer because I want to show you all the files. The most important thing is in deferred rendering, we want to select accumulator includes alpha, and we want to add one of our layers. In this case, I have front gate and the pumpkin. I'll just render both of those. Render main pass is going to, and default layer is going to render everything that is not in a layer already. So rather than having to put everything you don't want in a layer, or everything that is not already in a layer in its own layer, you can just add default layer. That means that I'll also get all the other stuff that is not just front gate or pumpkin. I don't really want that stuff though, so I'm going to uncheck default layer. Accept. See ya. That's layers. Make sure you're naming your folders, especially if you have a lot of renders. It's the pumpkin rendering by itself. And if I was to go in here and start to look at the files, first I have to find where it rendered to. You have a lot of different files. I have some files for the front gate. I have some files for the pumpkin. These are all separate EXR sequences, independent from each other. So if I import the pumpkin one, it's just the pumpkin. If I import the front gate, it's just going to be the front gate. So here's the gate by itself. A lot of stuff here. I have the pumpkin by itself. So again, I can start to build up a composite just with this stuff. Separate pieces. The great thing about the stencil layers is that they maintain motion blur. Like here, this looks pretty good, motion blur. Yeah, so now it's what you do with it. Could you add some more Gaussian blur to maybe that front gate, just to make a little bit more severe depth of field. That pumpkin looks super out of place because I don't have any ground elements or anything like that. Might just take it out. But that's stencil layers and object IDs in 10 minutes.